about the most risky thing anybody could do.
If it hadn't worked, it probably would have been the end of the Disney empire.
This was one of the fastest design projects in the history of America.
The Imagineers were very specialized people. They were all great animators and people who had worked at special effects and everything at the studio, who had formed this special group of geniuses, really.
It's amazing with Disneyland, the whole idea of a themed area to a certain place in a certain time and a certain story. No one had ever even conceived of that before.
I think that Walt wanted to do more than just a Disneyland. He was trying to leave us with a vision for the future.
Epcot will take its cue from the new ideas and new technologies that are now emerging from the creative centers of American industry.
We're not about building attractions or creating shows. We're about creating experiences. Experiences that stimulate all five senses and that completely immerse our guests into the stories that they love with the characters that they love.
I feel like we're in a renaissance time in Imagineering because we have come through some difficult times, but we're in this place now where we have so many amazing tools available to us and new environments and stories that guests haven't seen before.
We can't rest on the way that we've done things in the past. The best thing that Imagineering can do for its own legacy is exceed it.
Walt set a standard early on with the Imagineers. There was a standard that enabled people to come in expecting something and then giving them something even beyond that. So they left thinking, how did Disney do that?
And now, Stage 23, as part of our celebration of 60 years of Walt Disney Imagineering, is pleased to present Leading a Legacy. Please welcome current Walt Disney Imagineering Chief Creative Executive Bruce Vaughn and Disney legend and former Walt Disney Imagineering Principal Creative Executive Marty Sklar.
So that documentary is exciting, huh?
Yeah.
Tom Staggs got to roll that out the other day to the Sorcerer's Club, I think, and we've been working on it. It's going to keep going.
You know, what is the first thing you think about when you think about that? Besides Walt, I think it's the people.
Yep.
Because the talent that's been in Imagineering is incredible over the years and continues. And it's such a, you know, has the reputation of being the elite in this business and should have that reputation based on what has been accomplished all these years. But it's the passion and the heart of all the people like you've been meeting here this weekend.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things we've talked about recently in your book, which thank you for writing and sharing that knowledge and passing it on. Yes. But it really came out of the diversity of talent, and that Walt wasn't afraid of difficult personalities, that they had the right talent to contribute. And really, and that's part of, I think, leading Imagineering, is you really have to know how to get those people to be motivated to work together. And
well, I think that's, you and I have talked about this as a big part of your job is being a casting director, putting the right people together. And Walt was amazing at that. And I've often told the story. I love these two people very much. Mark Davis and the wonderful sketches he did for all the pirates and Haunted Mansion and Small World and Jungle Cruise, et cetera, et cetera. And Claude Coates, who was easily the best layout. He came out of background in animation, and he was easily the best background person. He laid out the Pirates of the Caribbean, laid out the Haunted Mansion, and so many other things. And these guys, they would not be caught dead going to lunch together. Really, that's not a negative. It's just they were very different personalities, and they had different friends and different interests. But Walt somehow knew how to put people like that together, and you rub them together, and something better than, certainly better than one person, and often better than 2 + 2. You know, it's amazing.
And I think I see that all the time too, and we really try to build our teams with that unexpected diversity, I think, and it's always a combination of what I typically refer to as technical, although our technical people are so creative that it's unfair to just categorize them that way, with our classic designers and creative people. And I remember I don't know if you guys remember Lucky the Dinosaur, which used to be around here. Yeah, Lucky was great. So Lucky was a prototype audio animatronic that we were pushing ourselves to free the robots from the show floor and get them out into the parks to roam around. So we had to change everything, all the skin, go electric. And the most difficult part was the neck, and trying to get this neck to be able to be fluid and look organic and not shake or jitter and hold the head at the end. And we had Akil Manhani is a PhD, incredibly talented engineer, but we combined him with Brian Ty, who really comes up from, his father was a sculptor, and he doesn't have any technical learning or PhD, and it took both of them to figure this out. We sort of had a competition to see who would get the best neck, and Brian, because he wasn't studied didn't even know at that time how to build models on computers and things, sort of went and tinkered and came up with this unbelievable linkage system that was really, I think, harkens back to the great, Yale Gracie and those kind of people. And it by far is the best way, but Akil but Brian couldn't have made it actually function in the park. It took Akil's math on top of that to come in and go in and actually make that model function. But it was really a great moment to see how they come together and worked off of each other.
You know, I'm actually jealous of something, I have to tell you, Bruce. And that is, back in the early 60s, I wrote a line that Walt liked about Imagineering. It was that Imagineering is the blending of creative imagination with technical know-how. And the reason I'm jealous is you have so much technical stuff to be at your disposal today that we didn't have 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 20 years ago.
It's true. It's true, and I think the fact that people know about Imagineering and the product is out there in our parks, and they grow up dreaming about this and studying the right things so that they can apply that at work is so different than I think when you first started and Imagineering was invented. It's like, it wasn't even a place. And what was that like with the earliest Imagineers?
Well, Walt used to say about Yale Gracie, and did all the special effects in the Haunted Mansion and the Pirates. He'd say, Yale, if I didn't employ you, you'd be home tinkering in your garage. And I think that was true. He was a tinkerer, and tinkering is part of what they did. And I still remember a meeting that we had. It was Yale Gracie and T. I never knew the origin of T's name, but it was Thornton was his first name, and he, H-E-E. I don't know where he got any of that. Anyway, he was a great cartoonist in the animation business, and he and Yale were working on something they called Planet Moo. It was an electronic shooting gallery, and it was set out in outer space, and they had crazy things like if you hit one of the characters in the belly button, his head would open up and a ball would come out, and they called it Screwball. Okay? But there were dozens of these things. And Walt came in one day, spent an hour, didn't say one word. I'm not kidding, not one word. None of us had ever seen anything as wild and fun as this. And finally, when he was ready to go, he just turned to Yale and T.E. and he said, "Is that all they do?" And we knew exactly what he meant. He said, "Keep going." It's so good.
Yeah. I think that's a big piece of the role too. Is that kind of motivation, and because it is, Imagineers don't come to work. They come and what they do for the parks and what they do every day is what they would be doing otherwise. Just it wouldn't be Disney. But by far, Disney is the best place to do it because there's To be surrounded by people who have the same passion, the same level of passion that all the Imagineers has, is just amazing. And I think everybody's in awe of each other at Imagineering. That's something that I think that place really breathes, and it's interesting. And I lucked out because I got to watch Marty for years. I've been with Imagineering 20 years and doing this role for 6, so I had 14 years.
He gets to correct everything I screwed up.
Well, it was great to have a role model. I mean, what about for you? Was it Walt or was it John Hench? I mean, who?
Well, Dick Irvine was a different. He was Richard Irvine was actually the first person Walt hired to work on Disneyland after Harper Goff had done some of those early sketches, and Dick was an art director from 20th Century Fox, and he came in, and a lot of the early Imagineers, except for the ones that came out of the studio like John Hench and Mark Davis and Claude Coates, etc. They were art directors from the motion picture business. And Dick brought a lot of those people in. Bill Martin, who was one of the key designers, Fantasyland and Frontierland, and the Magic Kingdom. Bill was very important in the Magic Kingdom in Florida. So for me, it was a learning curve working with those people and see how they work. But, I was always the kid because, many of them had come out of the studio. John Hench, who was really my greatest mentor, had started in 1939 at the studio on Fantasia, and so he had a long history, long before I started working with him. I remember John telling me the story about one day Walt came by his office and looked over his shoulder, and John suddenly, he was working on Peter Pan, which was the last one I think he and Claude Coates and some of the others had worked on before they came to Imagineering. And all of a sudden, John was aware of Walt looking over his shoulder. And Walt, again, he didn't say anything, but he went toward the door, and as he got to the door, he says, "Oh, by the way, John, I want you to work on my Disneyland project." And he said, "And you're going to like it." Well, John did. John worked till he was 94 years old and 60-some years in the company. Wow. So there was that kind of level of experience and passion, and the people that I learned for, Harper Goff and Blaine Gibson and Fred Jerger and Harriet Burns, and gee, they were, the thing that really struck me, and it still does, and I want to get to something that you're doing. They were teachers, and they had no hesitation to give you whatever information you wanted to know, to help you. If you had a question, you wanted to learn more. It was like a PhD program every day, with these people, because they were so good. And now you have a class at UCLA, which you teach. You have for many years, right?
Yes, 10 years now. We're going to the 11th year. It's the Imagineering, the Art and Process of Entertainment Design, and it really came out of the dean at the time, Bob Rosen, was a friend of mine, and we went to the park together, and he said, "My God, why aren't we teaching a class on this?" Because it really is a mashup of all the different art forms, storytelling art forms. Whether it be theater, gaming, by the way, it's a big piece of gaming because everybody is sort of an autonomous character moving through the parks. We don't know which way you're going to turn. We try to lead you, with little gateways and things and icons and weenies. And film, all those vernaculars are there. And I remember with you and John Hench really getting a deeper understanding of how there are long shots and dissolves in the park, and all these transitions are so important. So we put together and we've done it now for like 11 years, it's 2 quarters, and we go through the entire process of how an idea goes right up to feasibility. This is the phase where we're about to go build it, really understand it. And we do a lecture, first of all, and really go through that whole process. It's not just me, but Joe Rohde, Kathy Mangum, all of them come down and do lectures and talk about their projects. And then the second part, we actually put people in mini Imagineering teams. So we have down to 30 people and 30 students, and there's teams of 5 teams of 6, and they get a project. It's not a Disney project. I found that that was sort of, everybody's got their Disney idea, and what we want to do is apply the process. And that's what's amazing about, to me, Imagineering is this process can be applied to anything. It is it's kind of the best kept secret about how we do our things. Is just the freedom of thought and how you begin to move from no idea is a bad idea to the best idea in this very elegant system that allows the best idea to surface and allows it to breathe, and by the time you're done, you have this great idea. In fact, there's a funny story that Bob Iger told me. We had, years ago, we had Michelle Obama visit Imagineering, and at the time, the oil well was leaking off of the coast, and she just turned to Bob, and after she got done touring Imagineering, she said, "Bob, can't these Imagineers just cap that well?" And Bob said, and he's like, "What?" And she said, "You guys can do anything." And it's kind of true.
Yeah. But you know, it's kind of interesting that we were talking earlier, and as the creative head of Imagineering, you can imagine the numbers of letters and from parents and kids that we get. How do you answer some of these questions? Because it's all about, I want to be an Imagineer, how do I do it?
Yeah. Yeah, I really firmly believe this. My answer is, you don't study a particular thing, you just follow your passion, because that is one thing that every Imagineer has in common, is they're there doing what they're passionate about. And whatever that passion, and by the way, we have, we always say 140 disciplines. I think we say that because we really don't know how many. There's at least 140 different disciplines in order to bring these parts.
Nobody really counts, though.
No one counts, we try not. But it's insane how many different opportunities there are, and actually, sometimes people bring things that we don't even think of. We've got Joel Torme, who's the master rock work creator in the world, and this guy did Cars Land and Tree of Life and Everest and Tokyo Disney Sea, that wasn't something he was a sculptor from Hungary, and so it's who knew that would be a career path to Imagineering. So it really is just bring your passion and do what you love. Don't try to get pushed off into what you think people want you to do. It's follow your heart.
I always said in writing back to kids particularly, I always said, learn as much as you can about as many things as you can.
That's a good point.
And when you're young, try different things, because I know we all think we know where we're going at some point when you're young, but we really don't. And if the right opportunity comes along, or if we get exposed to something different, it changes your whole attitude about a particular occupation or a particular opportunity. So really, young people should try different things and find out what you really are good at, what you really like. And I had an expression I used all the time that if you're not having fun in the fun business, find something else to do with your life. Because why would you want to be in this business if you weren't going to enjoy it and have fun? And creating fun has to be fun too. I mean, it's hard work, and you have to be passionate about it, but it's got to be fun too. And if it isn't, then you've got to find something else to do.
And I think a key thing too is knowing where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, because it's a very collaborative process. You've got to recognize who are maybe the people that you should work with to complete the team. And I had a great experience when I first started. I was a writer under Tom Fitzgerald, working with another writer, Dave Fisher, on a little movie for the Land Pavilion, the Circle of Life movie, and The Lion King wasn't even out yet, and we had a script from Jeffrey Katzenberg, and he said, this movie, it's going to be okay, but, he said, use these characters because it is an environmental tale. And so Dave and I were writing this story, and we thought, it was the best thing ever. Our jokes were as funny as they could be, and we're cracking ourselves up. And then Tom says, we're going to bring in Irene Mecchi, who's a great writer from feature animation, to punch it up. And I said, what? What is she going to do? And so here comes this writer, and she goes away for 2 weeks, and I'm sitting there going, okay, our script was perfect. She comes back, and it was so much better. The dialogue and everything was so much funnier. It made more sense. And I really was I was humbled by that, because, and I said to her, I have to apologize. I was really, hating that you had this opportunity, but now I see. And she said, look, what you and Dave did was build the skeleton of the story. She goes, I can't do that. I'm only good after the skeleton's there, and then I can put meat on it and add dialogue and things like that. So that's, you really begin to understand your different talents and bring that to the table.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Tell us about how you deal with peer reviews, Imagineers reviewing other Imagineers projects.
Yeah, this is something that we've struggled with, but it is something that Ed Catmull and John Lasseter, very early on, when Pixar joined the Disney family, they live by this. They say that the success of their product and their movies is so much about the fact that they have this brain trust of talented directors and writers, and they review the movies throughout the process, and they don't pull any punches. It's a difficult process because when you're creating, it's part of you. Earlier, I think Eric Jacobson said it's like children. It really does feel like these are children, and then people are going to come in and basically tell you your child is ugly. But you have to, because you're actually all in it for the right thing. And what they do is these note sessions, and now we're doing this at Imagineering as well, which they're non-mandatory notes. So the team doesn't have to take them, they just have to listen. And the team can't be defensive. They can't say no, but they just have to listen. And a smart team will hear the notes and know which ones are good and which ones aren't. The difference between our product and Pixar, though, is that, an animated movie is always the same pattern. The story is different, characters are different, but you're really going through a pipeline that's very regular and predictable. We do everything from churro carts to giant mountains to lands, and we have so many things going on at once. We're building all over the world right now, cruise ships, and we design every bit of these things, from show lighting to the more obvious things like the sets. So how do you pull all that through? So we've been doing it. We have a really healthy culture now where teams are, really raising their hands, and they understand that the notes aren't personal. They're not directed at the person, they're directed at the project, and that we all have this in common, which is we all want the best experience for the guests. And you get there through a collective thought and creativity, not an individual. I think that's another big misnomer. A lot of people think being a creative executive at Imagineering, it's your ideas that get done. None of my ideas get done. I don't come up with the ideas there anymore. I used to be on those kind of teams. Now you just sort of go around and it's almost like you're going through the kitchen and different chefs are making things and you're tasting and saying, I need a little spice or a little too much of that, and you just keep moving around. I mean, did you find the same experience?
Yeah, well, I always remembered what John Hench taught me very early on, and that is that he put it this way, it's not an I business, it's a we business. And he says, and when you open a new project, you can't really tell that what you did, you basically know, but so many hands have touched it and hopefully made it better that it's not what you started out with, more than likely. It's been modified, it's been built up, and sometimes, for some people, it's a hard thing to accept. We've had some real talented people, I won't mention any names, but they're really good, who they wanted their name in lights. And in our business, there's one name on the door. Fortunately, it's a pretty good name, Walt Disney. Pretty good name. And not a bad brand, and people know what it is. And, but there are a lot of people who want to be more like in the movie business, where they get their name in lights and everybody panders to them, etc. That's not the theme park business. It's certainly not the Imagineering business. And you have to accept that, and you have to have that kind of tough skin that sometimes it's hard to accept, because you have a certain ego. We all have a certain ego, but you have to sublimate it to the larger goal, which is what Bruce said, of the product is so much better as a result of all this mix. Rolly Crump used to call it a big salad, and you throw so many different people into that salad, and they all contribute something a little bit different. Finally, the taste adds up to something that you want to really sample.
It does make it difficult to explain to your family what it is you do, though. I had a great moment a number of years ago when we finished the Fantasy cruise ship. Has anybody been on the cruise ships? They're beautiful, and Jill and sister on the team did an amazing job, and we visited often to Germany, and I was on there for about 7 weeks finishing up everything, because again, we do all the live entertainment as well as the you know, restaurants and shows in the restaurants, everything. So you have to be on the ship. And I brought, for part of that time, I brought my parents, my brother and sister-in-law, my nieces, had the extended family. And so they were on the ship for a week and seeing the shows, going to dinners, doing everything. And it was the last day that my dad, and now, by the way, I've been with the company about 18 years at this time, or 17 years or something. And my dad said, you know, your mother and I were talking. We think we know what you do now. I said, well, tell me one day when you figure it out. But it is, it's a very interesting kind of way to, you really are part of a bigger whole.
Okay, well, what is it that you do?
You know, Marty, it's a tough one. I think, you know, at the end of the day, it is about casting, motivating, and in that motivation there is, you are really helping birth the best ideas, which means you have to gently get people to understand when they have the wrong idea. And I learned that from you and from Tom Fitzgerald, I think, is a master at this. You guys have a way, and I try to do it myself, of you go in the room and basically, you know, you leave the room and your idea it's gone, but you still feel really good. It's like, you leave there going, oh, I'm jazzed to go redo this whole project, and you realize as you're walking down the hall, it's like, nothing of my ideas left. You're going in a whole different direction, but you're excited to go do it. And there's a bit of an art form there, I think.
Yeah, I think it's, in a way, it's like somebody has said often, herding cats, you know. Mm-hmm. And I always felt like if I'd been in a good cat fight, it was a good meeting. Mm-hmm. Because if you can get people to speak up and really say what they think, and not sit back and worry about the feelings of other people in the room, that's not easy, especially for new people who are not, they haven't developed a thick skin yet. And it's a difficult situation sometimes. But I always thought, you know, and we have a saying in Imagineering, no idea is a bad idea. Well, you and I know that's not true. I mean, I've heard so many bad ideas over time. But if somebody says something to me and you know it's a stupid idea, you don't say, Joe, that is the stupidest idea I've ever heard, because you'll never hear from that person again, right? And I can't tell you how many times the next day somebody would be at my office door and they'd say, you know that thing that Joe suggested, it wasn't right, but maybe if you, instead of X, Y, Z, if you did Z, Y, X, maybe there's a kernel of an idea there.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of open process you're struggling and continue to foster, because that's when you get the great ideas. When nobody's afraid to say what they have, what they think, when nobody's afraid to offer something that somebody else might think is dumb, because you don't know. You don't know what is going to hit, what is going to spark somebody else. And in a creative process, you know, and that's, I think, the worst part about a lot of things I see. And I see it at universities, for example, is these silos. Everybody works in silos, and they don't talk to each other. Right. And there's not an interface between them. And I think you don't get the best ideas that way, because you're working in an environment that's a closed environment. We want an open environment.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think also part of our role is to make sure that we keep people that might be considered a little crazy around the office, because these people do exactly that. And the biggest challenge is they're going to have...
You can give me your list?
I'll give you a list. But you have to have these people in the room, because their ideas might be ideas you're never going to build because they're so out there. But they stretch everybody. Because just when the people think, oh, that's as far left of field we could go, this person says something, you're going, wait a minute, now it's out here, so then I can stretch into that space and do this. The big challenge is a lot of those people won't get done, so you have to keep them motivated in other ways. To me, I think that's one of the funnest things about working at the place too, is putting together these various personalities and throwing them in a room, like you said, and just watching what comes out. And it's extraordinary. I love you know, every day we walk around and get to review new ideas and ideas underway, and it's never never boring. I can tell you this right now. It's always fun.
You know, Alice Davis said something this morning that I really sparked to because it was my own experience, and that is that Walt was never interested in what he did yesterday. He was only interested in not only what he was doing, but what you were going to do next, because he was trying to stretch all of us.
Yeah.
And if you can keep stretching your people to say, that's a great attraction we did, but, you know, now we've learned that. We've learned some new things out of that. What's the next one? How can we jump to another standard, another level? And I think right now in the theme park business, with other people being more aggressive about it, you have an even bigger challenge because there's other great stories out there that Disney isn't doing, and those are being done by a lot of ex-Imagineers, by the way. Almost every company has, we've trained so many people that are out and doing projects all over the world. And so that's a challenge continually. But if your people accept the fact that you expect them to grow, you expect them to go beyond where they were the last time, that's a wonderful way of living your life, you know? If somebody said, I always felt that what Walt said to us, that what we did yesterday was never going to be good enough again. We had to grow. We had to be better. We had to learn more. You know, things like, I talk about John Hench a lot. When John went to him about a couple of things. One was when they were working on Fantasia, John said he thought the male dancers were very effeminate. And Walt said to him, do you know? How do you know that? And John said, well, I really don't know. It's just my impression. And so Walt arranged for John to spend 2 weeks backstage with the Sol Uric Ballet Company. And John came back, he says, those are the greatest athletes I've ever been around. And they were such great, they were just very, really super specimens in what they did, and not effeminate at all. He had a whole different impression. And it was the same thing when Walt said, I want you to design the Plaza Inn, the new Plaza Inn at Disneyland. And John said, I have no idea about anything in the restaurant business. So Walt said, well, don't look at me, you find out. And so John took a course in restaurant management at UCLA. And he came back, and from then on, he was the expert because he could go into any kitchen and he knew exactly what should have been there. He knew what the chef should have been asking for, etc. And so it was a growth experience on a continual basis. And that continuing education is really, really important as part of what you do.
Yeah, and I think it's one of our challenges is one of the great things, one of the strengths of Imagineering is that Imagineers stay forever. They just don't leave because there's so much passion and they get better and better, and it's great to have deeply experienced people around. But you have to also, at the same time, find opportunities for the newer generation to get in there. So it's really coming to this balancing act and making sure you're setting up the right mentorships and getting people out there. Fortunately, we do have so much going on and so many different scales of projects that you're able to find these little opportunities to grow people through the system. But it's a kind of an interesting thing if you're in the middle of it all. If you're down as a new Imagineer looking up and saying, well, you know, when am I going to be able to be a Joe Rohde or a Tom Fitzgerald or Kathy Mangum? And it's really figuring out, you know, how are we going to put someone's career through this? Because it is a studio. It's a very unique studio. It's not a place that people just come and leave. We have a culture. Actually, I think it's a better way to put it. It truly is a deep culture.
Well, speaking of cultures, you know, when you do work all over the world, you have to think about where the product is going to go. And even though it's all Disney product, there are levels of knowledge that different people have around the world. What are you doing? What kind of approach have you taken in Shanghai with the knowledge that people have?
Yeah, well, Shanghai is a very exciting project right now because it's our next Castle Park. and it's going to be extraordinary. Being led currently by Bob Weiss, who's a very experienced Imagineer creative executive, and Howard Brown is the project manager. They're a really wonderful team. But it is China. Now, we have the advantage that we learned a lot from Hong Kong. We've got the park in Hong Kong, and we've been expanding that. And things like, in China, with the one-child law, it's actually what I call the inverted triangle, because there's one kid, a set of parents, aunts and uncles, and grandparents. So you've got more adults than kids in a Disney theme park. And you really have to change things. And we didn't think about that in the first round of Disney Hong Kong. So we had, and culturally, they're not, roller coasters and things are out in the open, more like a Six Flags park or something like this. They don't hide their show and coasters and things like we do. So Space Mountain was suffering because, you know, grandmas would get on this thing thinking it was a planetarium show and come out the other end a little disoriented, to say the least. And if you go around China, they have big video monitors that shows what's inside the attraction. We're not going to do that because we're immersing you in a story, so we come up with other ways. And we allow, when we did Grizzly Gulch, which was an expansion for that park, Jill and Cicero and the team, we have show elements inside the mountain. It's a runaway train, kind of like Big Thunder. But there's bears, very much in a Mark Davis style, and it's really cute and fun. But a lot of the roller coaster weaves through the land, so that anybody going through there can go, oh, that's what that is. And there's a lot of opportunities, too. We allow the guests to actually walk through the path of the train in this Frontierland kind of setting, which allows those who don't want to ride, mostly the grandparents, to watch, because they can see it going through, and so you get these different things. We're camping out at our tables, you know, in the dining rooms, because, again, the grandparents wouldn't want to go on all the attractions, but they'll sit there with the backpacks and things while the family goes out and comes back. That's not really great when you want to have more people come in and eat. And so now we're designing spaces, beautiful. The hub in Shanghai is going to be a beautiful park kind of setting that is very magical with lots of things that I can't talk about right now, but it's going to be amazing. But a lot of places that will be very nice to sort of sit and rest. And we're thinking about the entire park that way. We're also doing what we did, I think, really well with the Alani project, too. We've got a lot of new Imagineers over there that are Chinese, because you know, our job is to teach them what Disney means, but we need them to really help us interpret those distinctly Chinese moments and where that balance is going to come through. So I mean, Olani was really funny because, you know, that one, Bob Iger said, you know, big H, small D there. We don't want to just put a Disney attraction on Hawaii. We want to tell the Hawaiian story, and Joe Rohde is absolutely phenomenal, and he, you know, brought in these Hawaiian advisors. But one of the more difficult meetings I had, and this is one of our jobs, is you know, you can imagine when Disney names something, there's a big marketing group and Imagineers who come up with the names for all this stuff, and it's, you know, we think about everything because it's going to be marketed this way. But in Hawaii, you know, Joe was telling us, oh no, this is a sacred spot. You know, there's a whole thing, and what you do is you get a Hawaiian dreamer to dream the name. I was like, what? He said, yes, this man is going to go to sleep and he's going to wake up in the morning and he's going to tell us the name of our resort. So the first few names we couldn't pronounce, so, you know, he went to bed and woke up, and I would take these up to, at the time it was Jerry Zerlo, and Marty said, so, you know, here's a name, and they're like, we can't, that name, because I can't tell you what they were, but they didn't sound very nice. So in Hawaiian, they probably sounded fine, but to us, they conjured up other images. So we were like, okay, that's not going to work. And I was like, well, what do we do? And, you know, go back to sleep, and when you can... So Aulani is actually done by this master who is he's a name dreamer, and that's how we have our name. But that's the kind of company which I loved. I didn't get a corporate attitude. What I got was, you know, a lot of puzzled looks at first and said, well, no, if we're in this, if we're going to design this thing, if that's the culture we're going to be telling stories to, then we have to respect that. And as long as we can keep, you know, having him go to bed and come up with a new name, it's fine by us. I think it was around 15 names we went through.
Names are amazing things, too, as part of the whole development of something. I remember when Michael Eisner first came into the company in 1984, and we pulled out everything we were working on and showed him Frank Wells. And the first thing he lit on to do was something that Tony Baxter had called Zippity Doodah Run. And it was just at that time Disney had just released Splash as a movie, and very quickly that attraction became known as Splash Mountain for two reasons. One, he said we're going to promote the movie and the theme park attraction at the same time, and two, we're going to continue the tradition that you've established for mountain names. And so you look at the names of most of our thrill attractions. It's got Space Mountain and Big Thunder Mountain and Railroad and Splash Mountain, and it's the Disney tradition. Yeah. And you know, it helps right away to say something about what we're doing, because people know, right?
Yeah, and I think you've made a very good point, how important how you talk about the product and how you refer to it. You know, it's just, we don't make rides, we make attractions, and actually when you think about what Imagineering designs, we don't think of it as designing places or attractions or shows. We think of it designing experiences. Because we think about everything, the food and, you know, the bathrooms. Everything is thought about and designed, every inch of those places. In fact, you know, Animal Kingdom, most people think that, oh, we probably worked with the landscape there, and all, you know, we flattened that place first, you know, completely flat, and then built the hills where we wanted them, and put the trees where we wanted them, and everything. So it's really phenomenal when you go. I was just you saw a little clip there on the Leslie Iwerks thing of the Shanghai site, and I was telling Marty, this is, for me in this role, this is my first what you call greenfield of a full park. So this is, you know, you level the ground and you emerge, and last year when I went over there, we were just beginning to sort of clear the ground, and you do about a year of plumbing, basically. You have to get all the stuff underground before you can come up. And I stood where I remember that great photo of you in Florida where you're standing, and I did the same thing with Howard Brown and Bob Weiss and Tom Staggs. We stood with the X where the castle's going to be, and I think I almost fainted, because I thought, how are we going to do this? It's going to be, you know, there's a lot to do. It's like, it was great when it was drawings and a model, but now we have to build it. It's very exciting, though.
Yeah, you look around at it. I remember Paris, it was so cold the first time I saw that site, and it was just a beet field. And I said, oh my God, what are we doing here? I go into Paris where it's warm. But Bruce, I think you ought to get a salary increase, because I noticed in the video and this, you have the same shirt on.
I do. You know? Continuity. I'm all about continuity.
You go to Tom Staggs and say, I've got to get a second shirt.
Am I that transparent, Marty, really?
So you know what? I think we ought to throw this open to you guys and see what kind of questions that you might have. So if we could have the lights up, and
there's some microphones. If you just step up to a microphone, if you want to ask a question. Here comes somebody. Start on the left side. Yeah.
I know, sir, you have written a book, but have you written a book?
I have not.
You should.
Thank you.
Don't hold that against him.
It's okay. He seems like a nice guy.
Oh, yeah?
It took me 50 years.
I was going to say, I remember Marty during the process of writing this, he didn't look happy a lot of the time. It looks like it was a lot of work. But no, you know what?
Boiling your college program down to a book might be very helpful.
We've talked a lot about moving it out. UCLA is very interested in moving it out online, so we're going to maybe talk about that. But, good. Some people would take it, apparently.
Yes, over here.
Yeah, let's get it there.
Paraphrasing, I think I read somewhere that the mission statement of Disney, the organization, is to create memories.
To create?
Memories in a safe environment. It's gone through many iterations, but I just wanted to express just how many memories I've had growing up about 40 minutes north of here. We didn't have a whole lot of money, and this was the one place we came to every year that my dad was able to save enough to take us, the kids and my mom, and then probably around 14 we finally got to go to Epcot. But as cast members, you must have some amazing memories just from your entire career. Could you maybe express one or two of them?
Any memories, Marty?
Oh my gosh. There's so much. I told the story this morning about the first time that I had to make a presentation to Walt. I was 21 years old and had never worked professionally. and was scared as hell. And it was, yeah, that's as big a memory as any, because I always, and I said this morning too, that was a turning point in my career. I was either out the door before my career ever started, or he liked it, and as he did, and it was a stepping stone, became a stepping stone. So, I mean, that's a pretty basic thing to think about it when I think back on 50-some years of doing this.
Yeah, and I think for me it's, well, first of all, there's nothing like finishing something and watching the guest's reaction, and it really becomes into focus when you see it. And you know, you actually cry. I mean, you sit there and you tear up because it's such a wonderful moment. But I do have a memory that we were working on World of Color, which we're very excited about. So people, I hope you like World of Color, yes. And you know, it was not an inexpensive attraction. So we had a lot of stuff, but we were really, you know, inventing the instrument, writing the first piece of music, and learning to play it all at the same time. Steve Davison is amazing, but we were down there. I was with Chris Montan, who's head of our music group, and we were down there at 3 a.m. because that's after park hours, and it was very early on. And we had worked with the London Symphony and redone all the classic songs that are in there now, in their original form now, but we'd done them in different ways, Spanish guitar for Little Mermaid and things, because we thought, you know what, our guests hear these songs so much, we should mix it up. And there's these fountains going off and lasers and fire, and watching it, and the emotion wasn't there. And Chris and I were leaving that night going, all right, we'll keep working, we've got about 2 months. And Chris, you know, he said what I was thinking, and I didn't want to say out loud. He said, what if fountains are just boring? And I said, don't say that. There's like $100 million in that water right there. We cannot have fountains be boring. But it was actually a note from Tom Fitzgerald, who we sent him down. We were sending everybody to sort of peer review, and he said, you know, I love Part of My World so much, but I didn't recognize it until it was deep. It wasn't the same notes, and we're like, oh my God. So Chris immediately went down there. We dropped in Steve Davison's great, by the way. You know, he takes notes well, and he's a great critic. And he dropped in the music, so all the tempo was the same, instantly. And it just shows you how much you're wired to these moments in this music and the songs. Instantly, we're laughing, we're crying, and the whole show was like, okay, thank God. There's little things like that you just never know, and you walk away. And whenever I see that show, I think of that moment where fountains are not boring, thank God.
Well, this is one of my passions about the Disney parks. I think there should be more music, more songs. And if you think about all your memories of Disney and the films, what's the first thing you think about? I mean, it's a song. That's what you remember of almost every one of the films. First thing that comes to mind. Someday my prince will come, you know, Mulan, everything. Just think of every Pocahontas, and I mean, on and on and on. And Alan Menken, if any of you heard him last night. Wow. But that's the emotion, you know, and it sticks with us, and I think we should do more of it in the parks using. You heard Exodus this morning, yo ho, yo ho. Wow, you remember? That's what the Pirates, that's the Pirates.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we're glad, you know, when Pixar first came on board, you know, Pixar doesn't do musicals, and we said to John Lasseter, you know, you got to give us some more musicals, because, and by the way, I've seen Frozen. So good. Did they play the song for you guys here? Wow, it's going to be great. So yeah, that is deeply part of our culture. It's great.
Over here.
So Imagineering has led a great legacy, and it's the best at what they do. But for the first time in a long time, Universal Creative is getting noticed. How do you guys intend to fight back?
You know, Universal with that Harry Potter thing.
Transformers.
Yeah. You know, first of all, it helps everybody when the industry actually raises the bar, and it also keeps us on our toes. At the end of the day, you know, I feel very strongly that there's so much more to what makes a Disney park and resort so, you know, great. It's the service, it's the cast. We have so many great stories. I mean, Star Wars changed my life. I'm so glad we have this now. We have these new stories coming out. We're beginning to figure out Marvel and how we can bring that in. You know, Avatar is going to be phenomenal. And all the new feature animation and Disney products, more pirate movies, you know. So it's, to me, I just feel like, you know, bring it on. Bring it on, we're ready, and no one can touch us at the end of the day.
Not only that, but it says something to you right away because it's a great story.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great story, so that's what we try to begin with, is develop a great story first, and then there's lots of ways to tell a story and lots of new technologies that you can bring into it. But if you don't have that basic great story, you're behind the 8 ball right from the beginning.
Right. And they don't have an Imagineering, so.
Imagineering has such a treasure trove of classic attractions and attractions that are no longer with us, like Avengers 3 Inner Space, Horizons, and Journey into Imagination, which has been highlighted quite a bit this weekend.
Yeah.
Does Imagineering ever look at ways, besides merchandise, to allow guests and fans to relive classic attractions, be it the dish technology, showcase downstairs, or anything else?
It's an interesting idea. You know, there is, that's another big piece of this role. And I, you know, again, learned so much from Marty on this, that, you know, our parks are not museums. We've got to stay relevant and keep things going, but we also understand the deep nostalgia. And in your book, it really opened my eyes to how much Walt had a love of the nostalgic as a way to sort of introduce the future. And we've got to constantly be diligent about that. We know if we move a park bench, that probably was a bunch where someone proposed to someone or has an amazing memory, and we've ruined their life if we get rid of that. You know, their anniversaries are over, divorced, and you know, whatever. So we're very careful with this kind of stuff when we do this. And we do, actually, all this does come from the guests. You know, when we see that we analyze ourselves constantly. When we see guest satisfaction scores drop to a certain point and stay there, we know we have to do something to refresh things. But, you know, there is so many technologies and ways. It'd be very interesting to think about how we could bring those back virtually or something. It's interesting.
You know, I think a really good example is the Tiki Room. Now, you take the Tiki Room, it's a 50-year-old show. 50 years, and so much of it is exactly the same as it was when we started. But if you go in the room behind it, there was actually a room that had all the technical stuff that made the show run. That was bigger than the room you sat in. You sit in today. Today you can do the same thing off my iPod. Seriously.
Yeah.
So it shows you that there's so many new ways that you can create these things, but the story has to endure. And when you build something in the park, it's not like a movie. If the movie fails, with the exception of Newsies, for example, if the movie fails, you'll never hear about it again. It'll be gone in 2 weeks. But you build something in steel and concrete, and
can't hide it.
You can't hide it. It's there. It's going to be there for a long time.
Tiki Room's a great example too, because in Florida, you may remember, we introduced Zazu and Iago for one, and I remember the pitch that Kevin Rafferty, as a master, did. It was great. The pitch was awesome. I mean, you build that thing. It was so funny. And then we got in there, and I remember I was down there once after it all got in. Very difficult to make those characters and everything. And literally behind me, this woman sits down with a kid, and she's all excited because she had one of those memories. And this show starts, and her kid starts crying, and they leave. You know, it's like everybody's upset. But we went back. You know, we went back to the old show. So there's times where you just have to, you know, you try something. The nice thing is, you know, we can always bring things. We can always put it back. It's expensive though.
Thank you.
First off, I want to second what he said there. I'd love to have a chance to buy some of those old attractions on DVD or Blu-ray. That'd be awesome.
That's an interesting idea. I'm going to think about that.
The question I had, I can't imagine, Marty, you having too many bad ideas, but can you share with us maybe an idea that you had or a project that never came to fruition that you could share with us?
No.
You asked.
Next question.
I'm going to talk for one more, and then I just got the signal.
With rides like Mystic Manor versus rides like Star Tours, where they're based on movies, or a ride that's based around a theme, what do you prefer more? Doing something like the Haunted Mansion, where it's based on a theme, or doing something based on a movie?
Yeah. So I think there needs to be a balance, because on one hand, and we talk about this a lot, on one hand, if the movies are successful and great stories and great characters, we know our guests and we want to go there. So we want to deliver on what those movies do. And when those movies resonate, you know, this is your opportunity to go to, like in Star Tours, to expand beyond the edges of the film, you know, go to places that aren't even in the film and see it differently. But that said, we also are very adamant to make sure that we give birth to our own ideas and lands too, and it's recognized in the company. I mean, Pirates was not a movie idea first, you know. It's, it came out of the park, and it inspired generations of filmmakers who later on said, wait a minute, I want to, and Johnny Depp, you know, I want to play this character, I want to be in that. So we're going to continue to do a balance, and we have that in China where we're building everything. We continue to think. In fact, 2/3 of the expansion in Hong Kong were original ideas, you know, with Mystic and Grizzly. And we're going to continue to do that around the world. I think the balance is really important. I think that's it. I'm getting we have to end.
Thank you all.
I know, sorry.
On behalf of Walt Disney Imagineering, thanks for joining us today in Stage 23. Please gather your